Yep, you can hear. Okay, got 6 people logged on. Or I'll just check with the techie right here. Junaid, have you personal individual feedback in the email that I sent back? Some of you are doing things like Dr. Majid. I think if you could write, I didn't mention in the email, if you could write more of the Arabic script. I know for some of the things you're not writing the Arabic. Some people were overlooking the genitive, once again, case of the word which comes after it. But I'll try and recap some of that today as well, inshallah. Kind of left it on just really which would cap. We went through verbs last time in one of the last sessions, and we've understood that all verbs. First one. Yep, I mean, I thought you didn't submit this homework. I thought you were going to delay a while. That's why I haven't received this one. Oh, you meant the one from before, right? Okay. All right. I mean, we understood that all verbs originally look like this: fa'ala in Arabic. So this is the past tense verb, the archetype. So any verb, as far as we're concerned for now, and later on, we'll amend the rules. We'll amend the rules as we go along. So all verbs look like that. So fa'ala, and this is the essential template which we're concerned with. Okay, so fa'ala. Now we understood with the hollow verb that the middle letter, the radical ayn, was missing. So it will be read as, in this case, if it was fa'ala, the template, it would be like fa'ala. That's how it would be. So this is an example, qala. And we understood that, in essence, there was a weak letter there. Now, in Arabic, the weak letters are 3: alif, waw, and ya. So I'll put that here just as a recap. So, in essence, the letters that are weak are just 3. So you've got the alif, and you've got, it should be without the hamza. So ignore the hamza. Alif, waw, and ya. Now these are the 3 weak letters, and the reason they're called weak letters is because they resemble vowels. They resemble the sounds a, u, and e. And because of that, they are called vowel letters or weak letters. So we understood with the weak verb, qala, as an example. And can somebody very quickly tell me what qala means? Qala. Hello. To say. Okay, good. Said, which is more precise, actually, what Nadeem just said. To say you can answer these questions, but when I ask about verbs, you can answer in the infinitive, which means the verb in English, which, when we speak of verbs, we introduce them with the letter to. So to sit, to eat, to write, to read. This in English is known as the infinitive verb because it goes on forever. It has no specific time. In Arabic, there is no such thing as the infinitive verb, so we just introduce it with the past tense and the present tense. So we'll just say qala as an example, which actually means he said. Okay, but in English, when we're translating them, we'll probably just translate it in the infinitive and say, this is if we're introducing verbs, so we might say to say, where literally it means he said. Now, we understand that qala as an example was essentially qawwala. I mean, this is in, let's say, I don't know, thousands of years ago, let's say when the Arabic language actually, in essence, was being designed. This is it. It would have this wow over here, qawwala. obviously the Arabs never really spoke like that, but we're just speaking abstractly right now. So this hollow verb, as we can see, it's got a letter missing, which would originally be a wow. And I'm telling you that now. You're probably wondering, well, how will we know what the missing letter is? You realize, because once we've done present tense verbs, it becomes apparent in the present tense. And usually whenever we introduce a verb, we'll introduce it with the past and present. So if we go back now to where we were. So looking at hollow verbs, here we've got qala, he said, and we can see that's missing. So now to conjugate this, which means to kind of go through, to say, conjugate means to say he said, she said, to go through the verbs with different people, as in you are doing, I'm doing, and we call that process conjugation. So as you can take a look, this was the regular verb we did before, fa'ala, fa'alat, fa'alta, fa'alti, fa'altu, and that's the template. He did, she did, you did feminine, and I did. Now this, by the way, all of us, and I know we've got two recent additions to our class, new additions, attendees, but regularly, the rest of us, and including you guys as well, so that includes you, Nagina and Rehana, for, inshallah, for next lesson. You should know these as second nature. Okay, so especially the template. So being able to say he said, fa'ala, he did, fa'alat, she did, fa'alta, fa'alti, fa'altu, is something which should become second nature. Hollowness is dropped, and it's kind of merged on. And we use the vowel which resembles the missing letter. So in this case, we spoke about here that you have three vowels, fatha, or some of us probably know it as zabar, bish, and zir. So in Arabic, it's fatha, dhamma, the u sound, and e, the kasra. Okay, so, and these letters, the alif resembles the fatha because of its sound, a, the waw, the dhamma, the u, and the e, the ya, resembles the kasra. So whichever letter was missing originally here in the hollowness. So in qala, it was originally, let's say, qawala, it was a wow. So when we do conjugate it, we add a dhamma here. And we did say this, and we did go over this in the previous lesson, that you can only add really two vowels. You can only add a dhamma if it's a wow. If it's not a wow, you add a kasra. That's what you do. So qulta, qulti, qultu. Right, so once again, qala, qalat, qulta, qulti, qultu. And we did practice some of that. We went over last session. If we say sama as an example, sure. Right, okay, Amna's question, good question. I mean, what we're taking away here is the alif. You're right, we're taking away this hollowness here. But that hollowness, qala, is representing a missing letter. So in this case, in qala, it's a wow. So really, this should be like a wow here, like so. You see it like that. Originally, but it's represented with a hollowness, and the hollowness will always look like an alif, but it's, in essence, it's one of these three letters, alif, waw, or ya. And so when we conjugate it here, it becomes qulta, qulti, qultu. So let's say if we were to conjugate the verb sama, which once again has a wow, could you, I mean, just in English, could you conjugate that and type that into the chat? Could you do that? So, I mean, if you were conjugating the verb sama, which I'll write out here. So, cheating and looking at the, if you just type that in, try and think of just going through everybody there. She said, we've done that already. It's the active participles which are associated with hollow verbs. So the active participles, so place an alif. Right, I suppose that's just an apparent, actually probably kana. Kana. Does anybody know what kana means? I'll write that over there. So kana was ahsant, Dr. Samir. Anybody else? Did everybody else know that? If you didn't, well, now you do. Kana. Okay? He was. Now, 170, qad being another popular function. Anybody? No? Are we writing? Okay, so, right. It's writing. Right, okay, I'll give you a few seconds if you want to. We are looking at page 170 on the book. When I write on this whiteboard, sometimes the dots will appear a bit larger. That's because the digital pen, that's how it only allows me to do it in the past tense. That could have been, he left a year ago, he left 5 years ago, he left last week. If, however, I say qad kharaja, he has left, it indicates that it was very recent. Okay? Junaid just playing hide and seek there, constantly coming online and offline. Right, so does that make sense about it being the near past tense verb? So if you can see on page 170, there is a sentence there. Kana Ibrahim, at the top of the page, it says, Qad qamatis salah. And we hear this all the time, it's in the iqama, Qad qamatis salah. Now, so you can translate that now for me. Qad qamatis salah. Anybody would like to translate that and write it into the box? Qad qamatis salah. Yep, anybody? Which is, we are looking at page 170, so if you've got the book. A kasra. Why is it qad qamat tis salah? Why isn't it qad qamat as salah? Why isn't it qad qamat as salah? It's qad qamat tis salah. Excellent, ahsantum, because follows qad. Because follows qad. 2 seconds meeting. That is the correct answer. That if 2 seconds, 2 sukoons meet, we did mention before that it is broken, the silence is broken with a kasra known as, and what we refer to, or Dr. Surty refers to as the kasra of convenience. Okay, so you can never have 2 silent letters in Arabic. Now, because that was silent as well, that silent is broken with a kasra, with a zir. Okay, now going back to the lesson. So what we're interested in is the the hollow verbs and the active participles, because we covered hollow verbs last session, but what we didn't cover was how to make the active participle out of them. Before we go into that, can somebody quickly explain to us, reiterate, what is an active participle? What is an active participle when we mention an active participle? The doer. Ahsanta, Doc. Right, the doer. So, the person that does something, and what we do is, e.g., he is writing. Ahsant. So, either the doing or the doer. Right, that's correct. So, because he wrote is a verb, and the active participle is a noun. It describes a person that is doing that action or is a doer of that action. So, as a writer or writing. Now, the way we generally construct the active participle is we get the archetype verb, we get the template verb, which is fa'ala, which you can see on the screen. We then add an alif straight after the fa. We give the radical ayn a kasra, and we add tanween at the end. So fa'ilun. And we've done that before, which means the doer or doing. Right now, right, is that? I'm not quite sure why that is. Right, I mean, it seems to be working fine generally. I think maybe today, unless...
I think it's a connection, because that's what's happening.
But it might just, I think it's just the connection, because... Getting it to...
The connection.
I think that's today, I mean, because it doesn't normally... This is why perhaps as a one-off today, it's taken me a while to kind of launch the class as well. I mean, we've got... Should we go to sound on? What I can do... I mean, we've got an option. What I can do is reset it. But, I mean, I'll have to reset it, switch it up, put it back on. So it might take about 2-3 minutes. Should we do that? Let me ask the technician. Should we do that? I'll tell you what, let's do that. Improved. That was happening. I mean, we do. Right. Now, this is how you make language. So the difference here is that, you see, now you have the tool. You have the tool to, so if you know how to say the word help, you can construct the word helper. Or write, if you know how to say to write, you can construct the verb writer, or reader, or killer, or anything in that sense. You can construct the active participle, the doer of that verb. So if we move on to, but we've done this before, so this is just a recap really. Alima, to know, alimun, the scholar, kataba, to write, katibun, a writer, and the feminine was simply to add the ta marbuta right at the end. Right, but the interesting thing here now is, okay, what do we do with the hollow verb? Well, with this, because we know this is different as we've gone over. Right, sorry, I'm just trying to bring this back. With this, what we do, people, is if I take it here, with this, we are going to leave the alif as it is. So if you're watching the example, so if we take qala as an example, so here's qala, or write it out first, so it's in front of us. So qala as an example, he said. Now, what we do is we leave the alif, which is normal, so where you would have said, so I'll put the template here so it's in front of you. This is the template we're normally going by, fa'ilun, the doer. Now, we've got the fa, the qa, but we don't have a hollow letter here, so we don't have an ayn to put there. So what we do is we add a hamza. Qa'ilun. Okay, qa'ilun. So a sayer, that would mean, or saying. And we do exactly the same for the feminine. it would the feminine, the same rules just apply. You add a ta marbuta at the end. So that hasn't really changed from the active participle. That's the same. So that would simply be qa'ilatun. Okay? So you can see that qa'ilun. So the difference here is how we feel, because we don't have that hollow, the middle letter, we have a hollowness. So we simply add a hamza like that written on this type of, it sits on top of what is almost a silent ya type of thing. This is, you see, he has this bit, he's kind of slightly overseen in this book. He mentions it very vaguely a bit later on. This is why I thought this was very important that I kind of bring this in. He does come over this, but he comes out, he kind of mentions this later on in the book. So he's kind of missed this out, but it's more adequate that it's mentioned here. That's why I've kind of brought it in here. If we go back to the session, right. What I'd like you to do, right, sorry, right, what I'd like you to do is construct the following active participles. So we've got 5 verbs here. Qala, Sama, Ba'a, Nama, and Khafa. Before we construct that, I'd like to know what they actually mean. Well, we know what Qala means, and that one we've kind of practiced as it is. If I ask some people randomly, right, okay, so let's see. Nadeem, do you know what Sama means? Could you write the answer to Sama? Right, excellent, to fast, and the rest of you can see that as well. Right, the active participle from selling or the seller. Make sense? Right, now we can take a very good look there. Very selling or the seller, the sleeper, the frightened person. These are all describing people. The answers. Right, so here we've got the answers in front of us. Qala became qa'ilun, Sama became sa'imun, Ba'a became ba'i'un, Nama na'imun, and kha'ifun. So these are once again now doing words, if you like. These are active participles describing people. So these are obviously describing male, men or boys. So you could say, Huwa sa'imun, he is fasting. Huwa qa'ilun, he is saying. Okay, does that make sense? Right, now we can take a very good look there, very quick look just right there at Unit 20, page 177. Just take a look at page 177, sentences 10 and 11. It mentions, can you all very quickly just take a look at that page 177. Sentences just, and note this style. I'd like you to kind of Unit 22, actually the style of the Quran. Sa'ala sa'il, waqa'atul waqi'ah, these type of things. This is the style of the Quran. This is what it's trying to do. It's trying to make you become accustomed to the style of the Quran. Right, so now, right, okay, we're moving on to the next part of the session now. Next objective for today. So if you turn to page 184, which is Unit 22, 184, Unit 22. Now, I'll just very quickly recap for you, going to what we were doing. So you've got in front of you, so we've taken a look at this, which is the active participle hollow verbs. How to create, what is recapped very quickly verbs, recap hollow verbs, what they were very quickly, as in qala, the middle letter being something like a weak letter, alif, waw, ya, which when conjugated, is represented by either a dhamma or a kasra. The example, qala, qalat, qulta, qulti, qultu. We looked at how to make what is the active participle. Very quick recap on that: the doer, the doing, the template, fa'ilun. And how do you then make that from a hollow verb when the middle letter is missing? And we do that by replacing the hamza. Next objective, adverbs. So coming back to what adverbs are. Right, so adverbs, right, okay, adverbs are things. First of all, this isn't the actual definition what I've got here. This is the function. But the definition of adverb is something which modifies a verb, okay, which kind of characterizes or modifies a verb. But that's too vague in English. This is why I didn't bother with the translation, really, the definition of what an adverb is, because it's way too vague. Because in Arabic, that will cover many things, which we'll come to learn about later on, things like tamyiz, hal, and so on, and so many things which we're going to learn about, maf'ul, mutlaq, and all these type of things are really characterized as maf'ul fihi, maf'ul min ajlihi, and all these type of things in English are just have one name to them. It's just adverb. But in Arabic, they will have different functions and different names. So in Arabic, right now, we're looking at al-dhuruf. The Arabic word is dhuruf. Be mindful, dharf, which is the singular, if I write it out here for you. Dharf, dharf. Alright, this right here. Dharf can mean an envelope as well, but that's not what it means here, just to be mindful. Right, dharf can also mean a time or space, and that's what we're interested in. The definition we've got here for an adverb is of its function. An adverb, as you can see, it's something which is going to do with really giving an understanding of time or place in relation to a verb. Okay, so with that in mind, let's move on to adverbs. Now before we do, let's a very quick recap on prepositions. Now, because there will be similarity here. Now prepositions, if you remember, were something which linked nouns, pronouns, and phrases together in a sentence. So these will act very similarly, and in English, it was the pen is on the table. Now, and we took a look at some prepositions like li, ila, ala, min, fi, in, from, min, ala, on, ila, to, li, for, as in belongs to. That's just a very quick recap, that's all. Right, but this was the interesting thing, that when we used a preposition in Arabic, like let's say huwa fil ghurfat, right, which he is in the room, what was the interesting thing that happened here? Can somebody tell me that? What was the interesting thing that happened? When we used a preposition, what is it that it did? Urfa gets a jar. Okay, the genitive, which I was about to ask, what do we call that? We call it the genitive case. So, just to put that up in front of you, there you are. Huwa fi, this is the preposition, and urfa, as you can see, it gets this, right, okay, it gets this kasra at the end of it, right? We don't say tanween, Majid, because tanween refers to double. A haraka can be a vowel can be either, but tanween means the double of it, the un sound or the in sound. So in this case, it hasn't got the in because it's got alif lam on it, so it can't have double vowels. But huwa fi, this would have normally on its own, this would have on its own been al-ghurfatu, had it been on its own, but the fi has come and it's made it carry a kasra, as you can see here. And that's because of the fi, and we call this the genitive case, okay? Genitive. And we've done that before. That was just a recap. Right, okay, now we're going to take a look at some adverbs. Right. So, here we are. we've got some adverbs right in front of us. Fawqa, if you listen to the pronunciation, fawqa, I suppose I should actually start on the right, actually, being Arabic, reading that way. But how fi ghurfatin mean he is in a room. That's correct, Samir. If you, sorry, Samir asked a question, going back to just here, if this was huwa fi ghurfatin, if I actually just very quickly just write that here, huwa fi ghurfatin, fi ghurfatin, that would mean he is in a room. He is in a room. But in the room is with the al-ghurfati, because you can't have tanween and alif lam. If you remember, you can't have this with that. That's a definite no-no. Right, so okay, now moving on, back to some adverbs. Baina, if you hear that, baina, khalfa, amam. Right, I think somebody's, is that because somebody's moving that? Right, okay. Baina, khalfa, amama, tahta, and fawqa. Can you write down the definitions for these? I mean, you can either write it, if you know the meanings, you can put them down. I mean, you can put it into the chat if you like, or you can just write them down for yourself. I don't know why that's going off, actually. I think that might be because some people have their maybe pen activated now. No, you don't. Sit back and listen to it like a lecture. Don't have tahta. I think some of us maybe know some of these. Yep, and fawqa. You're already getting the picture that these are all direction type of words, and that's what we go back to what we were looking at here. The definition which we were interested in for adverbs was the time and place indicators. Okay, so that's what we were interested in. Now, if we go back to those few, so it's not, I mean, so these actually fit that description very well. That's what these are, as the roof. So you've got their meaning right here, above, below, in front, behind, between, and it's these types of words, besides, before, in terms of time. I don't know why this keeps, there seems to be a ghost in the machine. Right, so here's the example which I'm going towards, and it's kind of moving. The ghost in the machine is taking over. Right, okay, so al-qittatu tahta al-kursi. Okay, al-qittatu tahta al-kursi. And you can see the cat is beneath the chair. This has the same function. Right, this has the same function as the preposition. So you can see the final letter, whenever this verb comes before a word, it does the same thing as a preposition does. It gives it a kasra. It places it into the genitive case. Okay, does that make sense? Yep. Right, so now, right, okay, that said, that's kind of covered our zuruf really, which we want to take a look at. Now, if you take a look, before we move on, at page 184, which we're looking at, before we move on to the next topic, right there, zuruf adverbs, page 184, you've got an example which has got a sentence. As-sama'u fawqa al-ard wal-ardu tahta as-sama'. Right, you should all be able to read that and now understand really what that is saying. That as-sama'u fawqa al-ard, page 184, says rule number 35, the example, as-sama'u fawqa al-ard, that the sky is above the earth, wal-ardu tahta as-sama', and the earth is beneath the sky. But it's just showing at the same time you can see the voweling. Okay, فوق الأرض والأرض فوق والأرض تحت السماء. And it should make sense why that is happening. So right, so just to recap adverbs once again, that these are things which describe, really give meaning of, modify a verb in terms of its space or time, and they also have the same type of function in Arabic as a preposition. So the word that comes after them, they give it a kasra, they place it in the genitive case. Okay. All right. Now, moving on from there, we're going to move on to غير منصرف. This, we're still looking at page 184, the second section of page 184, unit 22, which says al-asma, nouns غير منصرف, non-declinable nouns. And what we mean by this is very clear, and we've got them in front of us right here, that nouns which do not accept tanween for one reason or another. Okay, and we will go through some of the reasons in a moment. So this is, by the way, this is how it's printed. Tanween is printed in a lot of the if you use Arabic script on a keyboard, it doesn't quite often. Sometimes it's written as almost like a 69, sometimes as a 99, and sometimes it's printed like this. That's the sound. So whether it's going to be or an or in, some nouns will not accept it, and they are known as غير منصرف in Arabic, or non-declinable nouns. So if we move on now, okay, so what are these nouns? So we've got several examples. You just rush through. That was supposed to have the super slow sliding motion there. I think the functions just got wrong on that. But anyway, so we've got many reasons why this happens. Amongst them, female names. So we've got things like Aisha. The name Aisha, or any female name, will only have one vowel at the end. So coming back to here, if we take a look at non-declinable nouns. Non-declinable nouns one of their signs is that they will only have just one vowel at the end of them. So taking another name as an example, Fatima, all female names, right, will end in just one. They will never end in tanween. You couldn't say like that. You couldn't write it like that. That's incorrect. Okay, that would be incorrect. It must be written with just one. So whether it's got a ta at the end or not, so Aishatu or Maryamu, all of these will just have one. The next is names of countries or cities as an example. So I've got here Misr or Makkah. Okay. Now, yep. So that should really, the only except, and actually no, I was about to mention a little exception, but really as far as we're concerned, for now, no, there are no exceptions. I mean, names of cities, countries, they will still have just one vowel, one dhamma at the end. And when we see that one dhamma, we know this is a non-declinable. Okay, and what that means, I'll elaborate a bit in a moment, what that actually means, a bit more of its function. But right now, one function, as far as we're concerned, is it cannot have tanween, cannot have an sound at the end. The other, as we can see, non-Arab names here, Ibrahim. Now, I know to many of us, Ibrahim is an Arabic name. That's because we've only heard it through Arabic. But actually, Ibrahim is a non-Arabic name, in which the Arabic language adopted. So any name, and the way we know that is because in Arabic, all names, all things fit a pattern and a scale. The moment they do not fit this pattern, the moment they go off this pattern, right, that, and there's many patterns, but to the Arabic trained ear, it can recognize true Arabic patterns. Now, Ibrahim is not an Arabic pattern. So it's just as Ismail, Ishaq, many of these names that we hear in the Quran, Musa, Isa, these are Adam, these things were not originally Arabic names. Malik's quite often, I mean, one of his almost, one of his replies that he would use very much is La adri, I don't know. Right, okay, I'll write that out for you at some point, but we haven't done the present tense verb yet, so I won't confuse you, but it's La adri, I don't know. Right, okay, Ghadban, what about Ghadban? Does anybody know what Ghadban means? Ghadban, so Atshan meant thirsty. Ghadban? Ghadban, people? La? Okay, Ghadban means Majid, just about to angry. Alright, Dr. Majid, you got it. It is actually angry. Right, so I thought, come on, I thought you could guess that one from Ghadab in there. But Ghadban means angry. La adri. Allahu Akbar. See, Samir, I see the influence of the school of Medina upon you already. Right, La adri. So Ghadban means angry. But you can see, as far as we're concerned right now, this ani, if it's added at the end of an adjective to describe it, that adjective becomes غير منصرف, non-declinable. Okay, so it cannot have tanween. Also, nouns which resemble verbs, like Ahmad, Yashkur. Yashkur sometimes is used as a name sometimes, or any other, you'll see sometimes, you'll learn as you go along. Nouns which they're nouns now, but they're actually on the pattern or scales of verbs. So, okay, now, okay. The interesting thing about non-declinable nouns, they do not take the genitive case. Okay, this is why we actually call them non-declinable. Rather, they appear accusative. So the example is, you see, if I said he is with Ahmad, you would say huwa ma'a Ahmadin. First of all, that's incorrect for one reason, that they cannot take tanween, because they're non-declinables. Ahmad is on the pattern of a verb. So Ahmadin could not be correct. It can only have one vowel. So even if you said Ahmadi, it's still incorrect, because غير منصرف verbs can only either have a dhamma, or if you want to put them in the genitive, they still appear accusative. That means instead of a kasra, they take a fatha. Okay, does that make a bit of sense there? So let's go back to, so you can see here, huwa ma'a Ahmadin. He is with Ahmad. That is incorrect. Huwa ma'a Ahmada is correct. Okay? This is why we say, Allahumma salli ala Ibrahim. And how do we end Ibrahim? We say Ibrahima. Although ala, it should have, if I said ala upon Zayd, which is an Arabic word, Arabic name, it would say ala Zaydin. But when we say ala Ibrahim, we end it, as you know, Ibrahim, which should have been also Ibrahim min, but it's غير منصرف, and it can't just be me. That's incorrect. So it's Ibrahima. Okay, that's correct. Is that making sense, people? Absolutely, because Rajulun, as an example, a man, a book, Kitabun, Zaydun, all names, Muhammadun, all names, all nouns will end with un. That was our default rule. And then we worked our way up from that rule, and we said, if, however, some nouns get an extra L added onto it, if they get this added onto it, you do away with one of the dhammas. So you're left with that. Does that make sense now? So Zayd would be Zaydun, but if you put a preposition before it, as you have here, it would become genitive, as in majroor, and it would be read as ala Zaydin. Does that make sense? But Ibrahim is a non-declinable noun, non-declinable because it's foreign. Therefore, just as Ahmed is non-declinable because on the pattern of a verb, so it can't take first it cannot take tanween, secondly it cannot take a kasra, so it can only, in place of a kasra, it takes a fatha. It appears accusative, and if it's got a fatha, we call it the accusative case. Don't know if you've made a quick note about that. Does this make sense, first of all? Was the last one example, it resembles a verb. Obviously, it resembles a present tense verb, which we haven't covered yet. So I'm just telling you now that, it resembles a verb, but we haven't got to present tense verbs yet. But when we do, you'll realize, oh, it does resemble that. That's why. So now, next task, right? People translate these into Arabic. He is in Ahmed's house. So note how we're making use and building upon all previous lessons. So here we've got pronouns. He. We'll have in as an example, preposition. We'll have construct phrase, idafa, saying when possession, something belongs to somebody, and we're going to have a non-declinable noun. So we're building upon all previous learning. Does that make sense? Is that outstanding or what, people? By the way, I did get outstanding for my Ofsted performance. Thank you. Alhamdulillah. Right, so there you go. If you can translate those into Arabic, he lives between Mecca and Jeddah. I'm from Aisha, and this will be a giveaway. Me being the kind, generous person that I am, I'm going to give away this from here isn't min, because you might translate. Because I wasn't sure how to, because normally people will say on the authority of, it's an. Okay? So an, which can also mean like from, or like from the authority of in that sense. Okay? Okay, Ahsan Samir, good thing. Lives. We haven't actually done that. Now, the active participle, there's two things. I'll give this away here. The active, this comes from the verb. Alright, okay, I'll just mention this first. To live, right, you've got the past tense verb, sakana. Oh God, this digital pen just does not like dots. Right, so sakana, you can either make the active participle out of that, as in sakin, or I'll just give it away now. You can just use the present tense, which we haven't actually done yet, but that's fine, just as a one-off. Yaskun. But that is incorrect grammatically, for more than one reason. One, you've ignored the big fee which you've placed because you've not made. Alright, ahsant. See, there you go. One answer. Without cheating all the rest of you, cool. We'll use the same structure for Arabic. So we'll say Baytullahi, the house of Allah. But as far as the there is concerned and the definiteness, we'll think of it like the apostrophe S. So just as you cannot say Allah's the house, the same way in Arabic you cannot add the onto the first word. So we said what to do, always think of it as in the apostrophe S, that I want to say this, but when it comes to writing it down, you write it down as though you're saying of. So that's the order to remember. Does that make sense? I mean, we did that when we spoke about the construct phrase in the previous lesson. Yep, does that making sense? As Jeddah being the example, it would be the same as Makkah, but you get the idea. Okay. Min Aisha. We did say you're going to use an Amina. So min Aisha, here qalat Rasulullah qala. Okay, that's good. Right, if we move on there to the examples, you can see here, huwa fi bayti ahmada, huwa yaskunu, and I know you could have said sakin, or huwa sakana, he lived, as Rihanna said, right, but either ways, I mean, this just, we can just slightly just move past this verb until we reach it. Huwa yaskun, or he lives, bayna, between Makkah wa Jeddah. Okay, so you can see that bayna Makkata wa Jeddata. Okay, and an Aishata radiyallahu an qalat, or here qalat, that's correct as well, Amina. قال رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم. But you see this structure quite a bit, and this is why I wanted you to kind of become familiar. You read in the hadith quite a bit that we read things like they will say, quite often when they're quoting a hadith, they may say, like let's say Abu Huraira said something, so they'll say قال عن أبي هريرة, they'll say from Abu Huraira, قال قال رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم. He said that, or he said the Messenger of Allah said, and they'll mention maybe the Messenger of Allah afterwards, the name afterwards. So you'll see almost qala come double, and that's quite common in the hadith language, especially. They'll say, and let's say an Ibn Abbas qala Rasulullah. He said, Messenger of Allah said. So just to kind of once again get you used to this language that is used. Okay. Understood what that was. Recapped on the active participle, the doer, and the hollow verb, how to make that. How to make that by adding the extra hamza. So qala becomes qa'ilun, as in the sayyah. Sama becomes sa'imun, and even if that was to become a feminine, we just add the ta at the end. Next thing was adverbs, to understand that what these are, functions of time and space. They modify verbs. Examples of some, like khalfa, ima, amama. And remember, it's not imama, it's amama in front of. An imam, which is obviously a leader, the reason we call an imam because he's in front, because he's in front of us, okay? So, and the fact that adverbs, they take the same kind of function, if you like, in grammar, in Arabic grammar, as prepositions, that they make the word after them in the genitive case. Okay, they make it majrur. So, fawqa al-ardi, above the earth. تحت الكرسي, okay, beneath the chair. بين المائدة, between the table, والكرسي, and the chair. So using these and remembering their functions. And then moving on to non-declinable nouns, which was our last lesson objective for today, which is nouns which cannot take tanween. That's one of their signs. And the other thing is, they do not take the genitive case. Instead of becoming majroor, they become apparently mansub, so which is apparently accusative. So they take an apparent fatha instead of taking a kasra. And many reasons for them being the way they are. We did go through many of their reasons, and just taking a look at them again here. We had reasons for them were, just to recap to you, that one, a feminine name, right? So you had names like, right, Aisha, Maryam, names of countries, cities, Misr, and for those of you that weren't aware, Misr is Egypt. Okay, we call Egypt Misr. I'm sure you probably all heard of that, as it is. Makkah, non-Arab names, Ibrahim, some scales or patterns in Arabic, like adjectives which end on a particular pattern, like an, right, Atshan, Advan, verbs which, nouns which resemble verbs like Ahmad, Yashkur. There are 1-2 other examples, and we will go through that later on. But I thought at this stage this was sufficient. And then we kind of had a go at practicing that. We saw that, and we had a go at practicing it here. And also kind of once again reminding ourselves certain rules of construct phrases. That when we're using construct phrase, which is called an idafa in Arabic, which we did in the previous session, that when you're making a possession, the first word in Arabic, as you can see on this chat function, which Junaid has written here, and if I move it onto the example here, huwa fi bayti Ahmed, this can never have al. The word bayt here can never have al on it. Okay, that's incorrect. It's just as in English, you could not say Ahmed's the house. It would never work. Okay, so in meaning, always remember it as apostrophe s. But when you're about to write the house, it would never work. Okay, so in meaning, always remember it as apostrophe s. But when you're about to write it down, the order of it in Arabic will be like saying of. So you'll bring, the way you'll say house of Ahmed, you bring the word house first. That's how you bring the word bayt first. And you must remember these prepositions, because so many of us in our homework are overlooking these prepositions and their function, that they give the word after it a kasra, put it in the genitive case. And this, it would be in the genitive case, but it's apparently accusative. It's got a fatha because it's ghayr munsarif, non-declinable. Okay, and we also understood sometimes where verbs come doubled up, like qala, qalat, qala, qala, and the common usage of this in hadith literature. So really that's brought us to the end of today's session. Homework today is not going to be as demanding as the previous sessions. I know that's a bit of a breather to many of you. It's still, once again, it's important, but it's not. I know we've reached a certain stage where now we can't have too much right now, because we've not covered the next session, which is about weak verbs. So next lesson we will continue to do weak verbs, and then we'll continue from that. So if you take a look at page 175, which is Unit 19, and 176, it continues, just Unit 19. I'd like you to read thoroughly all of Unit 19 and translate that. So you write it in Arabic as well. So Dr. Majid, you do write the Arabic, because I want you to practice the Arabic, okay? It's for your benefit, really. It's easier for me to just skip through it, really, if you don't write the Arabic. Obviously, that makes things very easy for me, but the point is I want you to benefit, and in order for you to benefit, you must be writing the Arabic. So if you write that, the Arabic and its meaning in English, okay, so Unit 19. On page 182, if you turn to page 182, you have a new glossary, which is on page 182 and 183. If you copy that out, there will be some verbs there which will be weak verbs and things like this, which we haven't done yet. We will be doing next lesson, but as long as you've copied out the vocabulary, you can perhaps remember some of it. Right, and wait for it, people. Saving the best for last. Alright, yeah. If you turn to page 194, and I think this deserves a very small round of applause. Right, Mabruk, we've reached our very first Quranic script. So for the first time in the book, Dr. Surty has presented verses of the Quran that he believes now you can understand. Okay, so what I'd like you to do is read, and try and read with understanding these Quranic scripts, which are on page 194 and 195. So if you read that, some of the vocabulary you should have is on the following page, page 196. You can copy out the vocabulary, but read this. I'm not asking you to write out the Quranic verses. If you want to, that's up to you. But if you read it and try and understand it, and try and understand the voweling, the structure, which is extremely important. In addition to that, alhamdulillah, I think that's a breakthrough, that we've actually reached Quranic verses now. So, that's one major milestone in our learning, because that's what we're trying to do, understand the Quran, and this is the first time it's being presented. So with that said, alhamdulillah, I hope you enjoyed today's session. Continue next week. Any questions meanwhile, do feel free to either WhatsApp them on the WhatsApp group, which everybody can kind of benefit from, because sometimes you might mention a question and somebody else is thinking of it. So, you can try and have a go at that. Try and get the homework to me, like generally Sunday evening. And Monday I will try. I know today I did send it today again, and that's because I'm going to America actually on Thursday for a seminar to deliver some seminars for this weekend, a winter conference. Now, for that, I was just doing some preparations and things like that, which kind of didn't allow me to return the homework to you on Monday, so I did that today, really. But inshallah, also, wish me luck for that. And it's been good speaking to you and seeing you, so I'll see you all next lesson. So, وآخر دعوانا أن الحمد لله رب العالمين. Wassalamu alaikum, people.